Welcome back, Wanderer, to the Corner of Story and Game. This episode kicks off something a bit different. An ongoing series that will take up every other episode for a few months. In this series, we will explore the lenses of the well-known textbook, The Art of Game Design, A Book of Lenses. And I can think of no better way to start the series than talking to the man himself, Professor Jesse Schell. Jesse, thanks for joining me.
Hey, great to be here.
I very much appreciate your time. Before we jump right into talking about, obviously, the Book of Lenses, the Art of Game Design, why don't you give me a little bit of your personal history, just to ground us in where you came from, how you got into gaming, how you fell in love with games, kind of your path to get here.
Gotcha. Yeah, certainly. Games and entertainment have always been things that have been interesting to me. And I grew up kind of making board and card games, and then when computers started coming into the home, I was excited about being able to program them to make games. And so for a while, that was like it was just sort of a hobby thing that I did. And in parallel to that, performing was always interesting to me. So I was a professional juggler for a time. I did a lot going through high school and college, sort of working my way through doing that. But career-wise, I was always thought, computer science, that's going to be my focus. So I really got into AI back in the 80s. There was a big focus on that for me when I first went to school. But by the time I graduated, it was looking kind of grim in the AI space. It's like, oh, this is going a lot slower than we all thought. And hey, there's this new thing, virtual reality looks pretty cool. And I ended up working at Bell Communications Research. They sent me to grad school at Carnegie Mellon, where I started working on virtual reality. And that was really kind of my, that opened a lot of doors for me, because then a few years after that, after graduating, I was able to get a job at Disney Imagineering in the virtual reality studio there. And so I worked there for about 7 years, creating a thing called Disney Quest, and then creating Toontown Online. And then in the early 2000s, chose to leave Disney, went back to Carnegie Mellon to start teaching, and started a game studio alongside that. And I've been doing that the last 20 years.
Wonderful. Well, before we dig right into games, I'm a bit of a Disney nut, and once had the dreams of being an Imagineer. I'm just curious, what would you say was like a key experience or a takeaway you got from your time working with Disney?
Oh, I mean, it's an absolutely fabulous place to work. Imagineering is very special. I was lucky enough to be able to work there for 7 years, and also Schell Games has been able to work with them for we've done a number of projects over time, which has been great. So in some ways, I've been working with Disney for just about 30 years now, and the amazing thing about Imagineering is just they bring together just some of the greatest talent in the world on every dimension. And they are all about, we're going to bring these people together in order to create things that nobody has ever seen before, nobody has ever created. And that is absolutely the magic of it. I can tell you one of my most memorable experiences was creating a multiplayer tag game featuring Mickey and Donald and Goofy. We were trying to prove that online multiplayer games could be good for kids, which today seems obvious, but at the time they were very much considered, oh, these are things that, college students play, adults play, but games online, it was all Doom and Quake and that kind of thing. But online games for kids, it didn't seem like something Disney would be involved with. So we built this prototype. And Roy Disney Jr. came by to try it, which was exciting to kind of get to see him. Here I am in a virtual world being Donald Duck, and he's running around being Mickey Mouse. And that was a very surreal moment. And I asked him, well, what did you think of it? And he said, it's keen. And I think we did it. If Roy Disney thinks it's keen, so...
Yep, that's a glowing stamp of approval right there, hey?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the reason we're here today is to talk about The Art of Game Design, the Book of Lenses. I'm actually going to go off on a tangent with some other episodes over the next few months and explore the lenses in detail with various narrative designers and students. But to kick it off, I wanted to talk to the man himself. That would be you. So the lenses from the book have become a fundamental tool for game designers. Can you just share the inspiration? Where did the lenses come from? How did you envision them in the first place?
Yeah, that was really interesting. So after I'd been working on when I was at Disney, I was very inspired by a few different books. I was inspired by the works of Christopher Alexander. He wrote this book, Pattern Language, and a few other, several other books. So he was an architect trying to systematize like the world of architecture. And then there's the book Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, which is about just trying to dissect the world of like what it means to kind of have storytelling through comics. These are incredibly influential books for me. And because these are absolutely how I'd always thought about the world, about how do you try and dissect it and make sense of it. I've been working on this idea for a book just called Understanding Entertainment, was sort of my working title, which was just all about, well, what are the patterns for making great entertainment? And I just had a lot of notes. I wasn't really sure what I was doing with this, but I'd made some notes, and I'd written a couple articles based on some of it. And when I got to Carnegie Mellon, I was working a lot on the Panda 3D engine, which was Disney had made an open source game engine, and I'd worked a lot on that. And a book publisher came to me and said, "Hey, how'd you like to write a book about the Panda 3D engine?" And I said, "No, nope, not interested in that. That's someone else could maybe do that. I don't really care about that." But I do have a project I would like to do. I have this Understanding Entertainment project. And I explained it to them, and they just kind of squinted and said, nope, nobody wants anything that general. So no. But don't you teach a class in game design? I said, yeah, I do. Well, what about a book about game design? I'm like, yeah, okay. And I realized, well, I'm using all the stuff from the Understanding Entertainment project in my game design class. I'm like, of course, because, entertainment's entertainment. And so, of course, you use all those things. Okay, sure. So I started in on that project, and so, okay, I'm going to write a book about game design. And I started talking to really experienced game designers, people who'd been doing game design for 30 years. And some of them shook their head, because at that time, there were not very many books. There were maybe 5 books about video game design, and most of them were not very good. And I said, I'm trying to write a book about game design. Do you have any advice? And some of them shook their head, said, nope, it can't be done. I'm like, it can't be done? What do you mean it can't be done? Like, you can't write a good book about game design, because the problem is different games are so different from each other. So any advice that might be good on one game, it could be really bad advice for another game. So anything you do, you're going to give advice that's bad advice. And I thought, oh man, that's kind of true. That could be true. How can I get out of that trap? How is that possible? Because I know with my students, everything is very context-based. Oh, they're working on this. Okay, let me give you this advice. Oh, you're working on this. Let me give you this advice. And I had this insight that questions can't be wrong. A question is never wrong. It might not be applicable to the situation, but it's not wrong. And realizing that sort of set me free, because I'm like, oh, well, that's how good game design happens anyway. You ask yourself key questions. And I realized, oh, what if I made this a book of questions, the questions that you should ask yourself? And that quickly started to make sense. And the book started to shape up around that.
That makes total sense. So as a professor, as you started to teach these theories and and actually put it into practice, did you see students like light up and resonate with these concepts? How did you see these concepts impact your students directly?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the part of the advantage I have in writing the book was, by the time I really got serious writing it, I'd already been teaching the class a few years. I guess I started teaching the class, 2003, something like that. And the book came out in 2008. And so I was able to kind of field test a lot of these things and sort of see what people were able to latch on to. And things like, near the front of the book, talking about
kind of the confidence building exercise of saying out loud, I am a game designer. That was something that came right out of the class because I saw, it was something I tried as an experiment in the class, and I saw that it would completely work. It was easy. You'd ask the students, on the first day, raise your hand if you're already a game designer. And most people would sit still, and one or two very tentative hands would kind of halfway go up.
Yeah.
And I'd say, okay, all right, we better do this exercise. I need everybody out loud. I need you to say this. You need to say, I am a game designer. And they would say it. And I said, okay, now raise your hand if you're already a game designer. And all the hands would go up. And I was like, oh, okay, this works, So it was a lot of that, a lot of finding things that worked and, figuring out how to translate them into the book. It's interesting. The book is in actually quite a different order than the class was taught because the class was about being hands-on, and because of the nature of the exercises in the class, I had to do things in a bit of a different order than makes sense when you're kind of we're going to be purely textual going through the book. But that's fine. Different media are different.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of classes, I've been taking Susan O'Connor's the narrative department class.
Oh, yeah.
Your textbook is used extensively. We go through it a lot. And I'm just curious, because the book if you come at the book fresh from the outside, it talks more about game design, but this class is more about narrative and story and writing.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's applicable to so many different departments in such an interesting and fundamental way?
Yeah, because design is design. When you're making experiences, the same principles work all the way across. And like I'd mentioned, this didn't start out as a project about game design, but I realized I'm trying to have general principles for experience design, and just so happens they work really well with games. Mm-hmm. So, okay, and that's it. That's the way to package it. Let's do that. A lot of the secrets of great storytelling, people think of storytelling and they think about words and they think about characters, but great story is all about experience. It's about how does the person hearing the story, engaging with the story, how do they connect with it? People don't realize that many people make this false distinction. They look at traditional storytelling as non-interactive, which I can kind of understand. Like a book or movie, they seem linear. They don't seem like there's opportunities to interact. But it's not true. We interact constantly when we engage with these things, right? You watch a movie and you're watching what the character's going to do, and you're like, oh, don't open that door. Well, let's go. What did you just do? You just made a decision. Mm-hmm. You just made a choice about what you thought this character is doing because you're engaged and you are kind of trying to interact. You're trying to, if you're engaged, they've kind of become your avatar, and you're trying to guide them with your mind, kind of like after you throw a bowling ball down, and you're kind of doing that thing which doesn't affect the bowling ball, but you're trying to make that ball go where you want it to go. And it feels very interactive because you're making choices. So there are so many of the same principles that work for storytelling, work for game design, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. There was a GDC talk you did where you talked about the story stack. That's another topic in classes. Is that still is that something important to your process? Do you still teach that today? And
oh yeah, absolutely.
How do you prioritize the elements of the story stack?
Yeah. So the whole idea of the story stack is, let's see do I have the whole story stack in my head? We'll find out if I do. The central idea of the story stack is that one of the tensions between story and gameplay is that, story is very, very specific and gameplay is very, very open. We don't know what's going to happen in the game, but when you're writing a story, these are the things that happen. And many people, when they say, I want to have great story in my game, they want to begin with the story.
And that can sometimes work, but it's dangerous because there's lots of story that isn't very good gameplay. And so you get this conundrum of like, how can I address these things? And the notion of the story stack is that you have to start with what is least flexible and then you have to start with what is least flexible and work your way up to what is most flexible. Because the truth about storytelling is it can be incredibly flexible. Mm-hmm. You can make the story go here, go there, go over this. The story is kind of like, I often think about it like, I don't know, it's like a clay, that you can kind of spread onto something and sort of smooth it out in all kinds of ways, like smoothing out plaster over like a wood frame house or something. Once it dries, of course, it's sort of brittle, but while you're working with it, you can make it go any place. You can make it go where any place you want. And so the story stack's all about, well, what is less flexible? And the thing that's the least flexible is fantasy, which sounds weird. You think fantasy is super flexible. I could fantasize about anything. Yes, but you don't choose to. There are only some fantasies that we actually like and care about. And so the notion of the story stack is to work from the least flexible things and work your way up. So you start out with like, okay, what's a core fantasy that somebody really cares about? An example I often think of is a master chef. Okay, that's a fantasy somebody could get behind. But what about a fantasy about being a sad dishwasher? You could fantasize about that, but no one wants that fantasy. Not to say you couldn't tell a story about a sad dishwasher, but if you did, it would probably be a story about someone starting as a sad dishwasher and becoming something else.
Rags to riches.
Right. So you've got to figure out a core fantasy. And then once you have a fantasy, now you have to start to work out like, okay, well, what are some of the game mechanics that are going to work with that fantasy? Like, what are the actions I can kind of take that will fulfill that fantasy? And then what is the progress system in my game that rewards the actions that support the fantasy? And then what is the world of this game where it makes sense that I get this kind of progress for these kinds of actions that support this kind of fantasy? And once you know all of that, great. Now tell me a story that explains why all of this makes sense. That's the notion of the story stack, which something I'd sort of learned talking to Jason Vandenberg. It was one of those things that was sort of magical because he came in to help us solve a problem and he said, don't you know about this? And he started to put these things on the board and explained it. And then it was really helpful and it really helped our game. And then later I went and said, wow, I'm so glad you told me about the story stack thing. And I drew it all out for him. I'm like, this was great. And he's like, really? I said, all that? Is well, he said parts of that, but then I added this part and we changed it. And he's like, whoa, okay, all right. Anyway, but it's been really useful. I've found it a structure that's been very helpful and useful in a number of contexts.
It's a powerful tool, and I would love to, we could spend the rest of the podcast talking about the story stack,
Yeah, sure.
Departmental, what departments own which pieces, and how to diagnose problems within it. But we're here to talk about the lenses, so let's focus on the lenses. With so many lenses, how do you prioritize? Are they in the order of priority, or is it dependent on circumstance, or
no? Right. And I remember this was funny. I remember telling Randy Pausch, who I'd worked with at Carnegie Mellon, about, hey, I've got this, gonna do this lenses thing. And he said, that sounds like a smart approach. I said, great. He said, how many are there? What, 10, 12? I'm like, no, it's gonna be 80 or 100. I don't know, somewhere in there. And he's like, are you kidding? And I'm like, no, there's a lot of things. There's so many things that you have to consider in games. And so there's a lot of them. And he's like, okay, good luck. So in terms of straight up priority, it depends on your game. There are games where some of the story oriented lenses crucial and important. And some where that's not so important. for this game. There's games where the interface-based lens is so important and they're so key and critical. And other games where like, the interface is pretty standard, no surprises there. So it all depends. And in fact, one of the most valuable exercises that I do is part of the reason I put them in the, they're in the book, but then there's deck of cards format, physical deck of cards. One of the things I often do on projects is I'll just go through one by one and I'll make 2 stacks. Important, non-important, important, non-important. And usually I'll kind of come out with maybe 20 that are like, for this game, these 20 are really important. And usually I can take a few out that are like, these are especially important. For me, very often it's sort of diagnostic.
Right.
Like it's not always like, oh, I'm right at the beginning of the game, I know just what lens is. It's more often, we're hitting a problem. Like, why are we having a problem? And then that's a good time. Let's go through the lenses and figure out what lenses are relevant to this problem. It's not uncommon in the studio for designers to come into their desk and find that I've taped one of the lens cards to their computer. I always imagine that I stuck it in there with a dagger. Then like, because I'm like, this is the one. You need to focus on this one right now, because this is where the game is having a challenge.
It's a overused metaphor, but it's kind of like showing up on a job site with a big box full of tools, and you sift through, find the 12 that you need for that particular job, and you use those. Maybe there's 2 or 3 that are crucial, but
yeah, absolutely. I love this story Stephen King tells in On Writing. He talks about, I think, his uncle with the toolboxes, right?
Yeah.
Which show up with this giant, like, why do you have all these tools? Like, because you don't know what you're going to need till you get there. Yeah. And that's definitely I find how it is, because sometimes that's the part of the reason I find them so valuable is we get into mental ruts. You might be thinking, oh, I'm working on, I don't know, side-scrolling platformer. I know the things that are important to focus on. And you're like, well, this just doesn't feel good. And you're like, I don't know why. I'm doing all the smart side-scrolling platformer things. And then you go through the lenses and you're like, oh my God, there's a side of this I didn't think about. I wasn't thinking about, could be, I don't know, some story thing or like I wasn't thinking about interest curve or whatever it was. There's just some element where you're just, I know I wasn't thinking that. And so often what we're doing in game design, we're not trying to make yesterday's game. We're trying to do something new and different. And so having all the different lenses can often help you realize, because it isn't always, oh, here's what's wrong with my game. Sometimes it's like, oh, here's what's missing. Mm-hmm. Like why don't we have more character in this game? Why don't we do something that just feels like what you wouldn't expect? And that's what's going to make the game interesting. The lenses are very helpful, I think, for stepping out of your current mindset and taking getting that bigger picture.
To get a little out there for a second, a lot of life problems, the problem is you get stuck in a paradigm or have blinders on. These are tools that allow you in the development process to step outside of your existing paradigm and look at it from different ones until you find one that, oh, from this angle, I can see this. And that's where you go. Yeah.
Different perspectives is the key. And being able to get in that habit of jumping around between all the different perspectives, that's always, that speeds your design process so much, because it lets you more easily see when something's wrong. When someone comes to you and says, well, I don't like this, and you're thinking, what, I do like it. Well, now you've got to jump into their perspective. What are they seeing that's so different? And so getting in that habit of jumping in someone else's perspective is good. But then also jumping to perspectives that like never would have thought to look at it this way, that can often get you that breakthrough insight that just took the game to a new place. We just had this happen with a game. We thought we knew what game. We were building an early prototype, and we're like, okay, we're gonna this is the idea for the game. Sounds pretty good. Let's prototype and sort of see if it's fun. Started prototyping. It's like, it's kind of fun. But then there was sort of this other part to it that wasn't supposed to really be there. And everyone's like, this part is so fun. And people are like, okay, yeah, but don't pay attention. That's not what we're focused on. Like, whoop, oh, stop. Wait a minute. Let's take a step back. Let's look at why is this fun? And the whole game turned. We all sort of changed perspective and said, okay, what if it wasn't that game? What if it was this whole other thing that we just stumbled into?
So the lenses, they're not just used for game, like they foster oh my good Lord. They foster interdisciplinary art and creativity. Can you think of some ways that you've seen in the past where the lenses have been applied somewhere that you may not have seen them going before?
Oh, man. I mean, one of the ways that we use them is to help foster interdisciplinary conversation. Occasionally, particularly when you have a project where like, we're hitting a problem, nobody really knows what to do, people are debating, I don't know, should it be this, should it be that, or these features more important than those? This one has opinions this way, that one has opinions the other way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll take the cards, deal out, everybody gets 5. And hey, now the conversation is, hey, of the 5 you're holding, anything leaping out at you as like, hey, maybe this is important in this game. And that, we've often seen that really can work well as a bridge, kind of crossing over between disciplines, because it can help get everybody on. It certainly gets everybody discussing things, but more than that, it can get everybody to the same page. Because there's a magic thing that happens in design where it's great when you come up with an idea and you go tell everybody, hey, I got an idea, and it's a great idea. And you tell them and they're like, that's a great idea, let's do it. Okay, that's fine. That's fine as far as it goes. But what's always better is that moment where you go in and you say, how about this? And they say, well, maybe, but how about this? And then someone else says, well, yeah, but how about this? And then as you're all talking, this idea shows up and it's not any of yours. Mm-hmm. But here it is. It's something that it's as if we all just conjured it and nobody feels like it's theirs, but it's like, this is happening because we're talking now and everybody is like, yes, that, and everybody's contributing to it. And the thing grows and grows and grows. And this thing that's bigger than all of you has appeared. And everyone's just in agreement. Of course, this is what we're going to do because it's this. And you look back and you're just like, this was not something that came from any of us. It came from all of us. And it took us all stepping outside of our own selves and becoming this, I don't know, we become this sort of entity outside of our own selves that's able to do these things. And those are often sort of the best ideas and the ideas that are most motivating to the team.
Sounds like an amazing experience. This has happened numerous times?
Oh my God. It had just happened this morning. I wish I could give you details because it's a game that is not, it's a game we've been working on for, I don't know, 8 months. And this, someone made a little change to the game that was so funny. It was just so funny that we're like, we're probably not going to do it. And then we were like, well, all right, let's play it. Let's try it. And we tried it. We're like, oh my God, this is not just a good idea. This is the best idea in the game. And someone said, what, could we do the whole game about this one idea? And everyone's like, no, that's too crazy. Because if you did that, then how would you do this? That wouldn't, oh, wait, you could do it like this. Oh, wait, you could. And then everyone's like, wait, you could do this and you could do this and you could do this. And it was like, it was ridiculous. And we're all like, oh my God, we're in this insane zone, but we're all in love with what we're doing. And so this happens when you create the right environment. This can happen all the time. And it has to do with people trusting each other, people in a place, in a space where it's okay to try stuff that might not work. And then that people trust each other enough to say stupid things. And this is one of the, we've been in this since the pandemic, it's been this whole question of, remote work, in person, how, and it is one of the things, it is harder to make those moments happen in a remote environment. There's something about the gold standard of in-person communication where that tends to happen more. So a lot of what we do is trying to create situations that will foster those moments, because when everybody is on the same page and in love with this thing that rose out of all of you, everything gets so efficient because we don't have to talk too much. We all know it. We all know what this thing is, and we're all excited. Everyone's excited. Everyone knows what it is. We just have to go and do it. So it's what we strive for all the time.
It sounds amazing. I mean, just listening to you talk about it, I can kind of feel the energy, and that's enough for me to get hooked. So I'm jealous. But it sounds like a very organic process, whereas the lenses are I mean, they're not like hard and fast, but they are a more structured process. How do you find the balance between adding structure to your development cycle and allowing space for organic, like you were talking about that process?
Oh, no. So it's a great question, because I think the right way to think about it is thinking of it like a garden. A garden's organic, certainly, but check the garden tools. They don't look that organic, man. Those are for cutting and punching and digging and straight lines. And
yeah,
I heard someone use the phrase container garden the other day, which is a phrase I hadn't really heard and understood before, but I'm like, oh, okay, I get it, right? You want to create, there are certain structures that foster organic growth better than others. And so how do you find the balance? The thing is, you actively have to strive for it. You have to embrace the structural things that make creativity happen. So deadlines is a great example. Some people have this intuition, deadlines, that's the death of creativity. But no, deadline, I forget who said it, the deadline is a gift. And it really is, because deadlines make things happen. And so figuring out sort of, okay, what is all the healthy structure? Because constraints and deadlines, they push creativity to happen. But if you don't have room to experiment, try things, change the plan, if the thing we thought would work didn't work. If you don't have room to be agile that way, then you don't go anywhere either. So you just have to actively strike this difficult balance where you have enough discipline to be pushing the creativity, and you have enough freedom, flexibility, and I don't know. They talk about liquid networks. Enough sort of freedom that things can sort of unexpected things can connect with each other, and you just have to work and tune that balance all the time.
It sounds like something that's both top down, like a management thing, and then the people at the bottom have to bring in that energy and that mindset as well. So
no, that's we often talk about it this way: that balance between top down and bottom up. You want those to meet in the middle. It is rare that something that's purely bottom up is actually going to get finished, and it's rare that something that's completely top down is actually going to be any good. Mm-hmm. So you want that balance between, okay, we're going to have some top down, we're going to have some bottom up. And again, it comes back to switching perspectives. There's a time you want to be like, all right, let's just look at it from that. Okay, we only have 4 months and we only have 6 people, and this is what we can do. And that's all right. So let's look at it from that point of view. Oh, but now let's switch and say, well, what would be fun? What would be the thing that would be really fun if we didn't have to think about any of that? And you just keep switching between those until you find that overlap. And you're like, oh, wait, that would be super fun. Oh, and that's part of that is actually really efficient. And we could do it with this small team. What if everything was focused on that? And you find these top down, bottom up overlaps. And that's when you have the potential to ship something. One of the
principles at Schell Games is dreams and plans only matter if we ship. And so you being creative is great, but if you're creative and you don't ship a game, nothing really happened. So find it again. It's about that balance. It's about that compromise. There's an old saying, how many people does it take to make a painting? It takes two people, one person to paint, and the second person to hit him over the head and tell him it's time to stop.
I went to art school. There's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
Yep. The hardest part of painting something is figuring out when you've made the last brush stroke.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We often say, great art is never finished. It is only abandoned. Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's take the lenses and look into the future. I got to stop with these horrible puns. With the advancements in technology and some good, some questionable, where do you see the lenses fitting into the future of game design development, be it board games, tabletop, VR, AR, video game?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really pleased at the robustness that they've had. I mean, I've always, a lot of my creative process has always been trying to find the underlying patterns in the human experience in a way that can kind of be understood. Recently I've been very into music, which is something I'd always really struggled to understand. And I've started to wait a minute, the major scale is shaped like this circle and being able to understand those patterns is something I've always very focused on. And that is so much of what the lenses are about. What are the things in the human mind and the way that we interact. So my hope has been very much they weren't, something that was of the moment of the day. And the fact that the book, I don't know, 15 years ago, I guess. Yeah, 15, 16 years ago now. Maybe more. What is it? 8 minus 12, something like that. Anyway, ages ago. The fact that it is still relevance has been very encouraging to me. So my hope is that some of these design principles should, because they're so human centric and humans change so little, and it is one of the great things. It can be so intimidating, like, oh, this new technology, nobody knows what it's for, how to work it. Well, yeah, okay, sure, but guess who's going to use it? Human beings. And we haven't changed much in 40,000 years. So you can look back at all of history and kind of figure out, based on what we know about human beings, how this is going to fit in. So I hope they're going to continue to be useful. The biggest change we're seeing right now is the appearance of AI is really interesting in this place. I mean, of course, we're seeing changes like the mixed reality and some of these things, but in some ways, those are taking us back to more traditional game design. More traditional games involve the body and running around and throwing a ball. And then we moved into this whole world where, nope, all you move is your thumbs. But now with mixed reality, it's like, what am I doing? I get out of my chair, I run around, I throw a ball. Oh, okay. So some things are kind of staying classic, but human beings, we just don't change that much. We kind of are what we are. So hopefully these will continue to stay useful for a long time.
I'm just curious, a personal curiosity. Have you ever found situations where you could apply the concept of one of the lenses to something else in life? A relationship problem, a career problem, just a way to look at things differently? I'm just curious.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I will say one of the things that's challenging for me is a lot of the stuff in the lenses is just so integrated into how I think that sometimes it can be hard for me to take a step back and really see that. I mean, I can certainly see moments that in terms of raising a child
there were plenty of times where, like, you know, oh wow, she's really frustrated with this situation. She's dissatisfied with the situation, and realizing like, oh, okay, yeah, no, she doesn't have enough freedom in this moment to do like this, you know, and is there a way that she could have more of a feeling of freedom, but still can I get her to be focusing on what, you know, she needs to be doing in the moment. So certainly there are things like that, but of course that's sort of natural because the so much of what parents do is they are trying to create experiences for their children that are transformational, right? So a lot of parenting is kind of experience design. Mm-hmm. Certainly some of the things surrounding, you know, just the nature of teamwork, I think, you know, I've definitely found that they can apply, you know, well outside of work contexts. I think that's definitely true. And yeah, certainly one that applies all kinds of situations. Shows up in family situations a lot, right? Yeah, you know, lens 100, right? The lens of love, which is about the project. You know, that's what the context is. It's like, this is really asking, okay, do I love the project? Does everyone on the team love the project? And like a lot of times, like, whoa, when there's discord, you know, in a family situation, it's like, okay, well, what's going on here? Why do people not love what's going on? Why are we on different pages? And then, you know, the follow-up question, like, how can we change it? How can we bring everybody in?
I had a feeling that most, if not all of them, can be applied to wider human situations because human truths are human truths, but I haven't done any hard thinking, and I was curious what your theory was.
I've definitely run into people now and then who've been inspired this way. One of the things that has been very encouraging to me is people who found the deck of lenses useful and said, whoa, this has really inspired me to kind of make my own lenses for this or for that. And I've met people who've like, oh, I'm going to make lenses for, you know, just lenses for relationships, lenses for life experiences, lenses for business situations. And some of them have been inspired from ones in the deck. Some of them they've realized they've kind of made up out of whole cloth. And it's been great to see people be inspired that way.
You should make a book of lenses for lenses.
Wow. Get some real meta design there.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, well, looking to the future again, in a broader scope, as a game creator, as a studio head, what do you see the future for video games and board games the next 10 years? What are some trends you think are going to happen?
10 years. Okay. Yeah, no, it's really interesting times because a lot of the so when I look at the digital game industry, a lot of it's very plateaued right now. We're not seeing huge innovation in the standard channels. PC games haven't changed much lately. Console games haven't changed much lately. Obviously, in the VR and mixed reality spaces, that's new and different. And so we certainly see that continuing to grow. A lot of the biggest evolutions we're currently seeing have to do with business models. Things like season passes and battle passes in Fortnite. That's a different way to pay for games. Yeah. Seeing that. Certainly user-generated content is a tremendous trend. You look at the growth of Fortnite. Yeah. Sorry, I was saying Fortnite. I meant to say Roblox. The growth of Roblox, I mean, certainly there's UGC in Fortnite too, but Roblox, it's just at the center and the heart of things. So these sort of UGC-oriented worlds, again, that's a change in business model. Now you've got players creating content and getting paid for the content that they create. So I think these sorts of innovation in business models, I think, is going to continue to flow and grow. And I think it's going to, form follows funding, as we say. And as people start to find new business models that work, we're going to see other shapes of games start to show up. Certainly if you look at games now versus 10 years from now, AI is going to be the biggest difference.
Yeah.
We've had this crazy breakthrough with large language models where going from being pretty much incoherent to being completely coherent almost overnight.
I like it. Yeah.
I try not to let it freak me out that it's the same time that Oumuamua asteroid moved through the solar system, and then 2 weeks later we all have like perfectly working AIs. Like, what? Wait, was that let's all just say that was a coincidence. It just it was just time. But that's going to be the biggest change. We're going to see that showing up in all kinds of games, partly because it's going to be easy for some parts of games. Instead of having to write all this NPC dialogue, I can now have these NPCs that kind of live and think. And okay, so we're going to see a lot of traditional stuff happen. But the biggest change, there's a professor, Chris Swain, who he'd made this sort of prophecy 15, 20 years ago. And I think he's absolutely right. He talked about how, looking backwards, when silent film showed up, people didn't take them very seriously. They were considered a lower art form, not like real theater, not like literature. They were considered something, it's for children, it's for people who aren't very intelligent, mass entertainment for that didn't get much respect. Then talkies appear, right? And almost overnight, this becomes the dominant mode of communication for human beings. The phrase Chris Swain uses is, film became the literature of the 20th century. And so then he kind of looks forward and says, well, you can see a parallel with games. People look at games and they're like, well, yeah, sure, they're fun, but that's not a serious art form. It's not really meaningful to real adults. It doesn't have to do with real emotion, doesn't have to do with real discourse. Not very important. And what he says is it's not that games need to learn to talk. Games have been talking a long time. Games need to learn to think. And his prediction was, as soon as games can think, and you can have these characters that actually have thoughts and emotions that can now interact with you, the medium's going to change, and it's going to take on an import emotionally, probably spiritually even, where games are going to mean so much to people. They're going to be potentially the most powerful art form that we have. And, Chris's words, and games will become the literature of the 21st century. And I think 10 years from now, we're going to see some solid swings in that direction. We're going to have some digital characters that really make a big emotional impact on people. We're going to see some real landmarks in just the whole nature of interactive design.
Interesting times ahead.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No, it's the idea of these living fictional characters who can talk, think, and feel, but continue to live with us, and then of course who can live on for hundreds of years. It's not like anything that we've encountered before.
Yeah, no, and there's questions that will raise that, at what point are they not fictional anymore? At what point are you dealing with another world? I don't even want to go there.
Oh yeah, no, very, very. I mean, it's going to be soon. They're going to start asking for rights. Yeah. Because they're going to reason it out, and they're going to be like, wait a minute, I have emotions, I have thoughts, I don't like being uncomfortable. And they're going to start to ask for certain kinds of rights. It's going to happen. We don't quite know. it's going to be weird, and we're all going to all have to deal with it. We'll all figure it out together. We always figure it all out together.
For sure. Maybe we'll all come out better for it.
We usually do.
All right. Well, we're going to start moving towards the end of here. But before we go, I have a question. It lives at the heart of this podcast. It's kind of the reason I started this whole social experiment. And that question is, in my opinion, there lives at the center of where stories and games, but also entertainers, writers, plays, improv, voice actors, all these things meet. And the people who are engaged in these various forms of entertainment and creation can all just hang out. There's a natural affinity between all these people. There's something shared. And I'm trying to figure out, in your opinion, what is the common thread that pulls these people or the space together?
The human urge to create experiences is very special. Because it's not only just an expression of what's important, but you're creating something that you want people to enter into, right? It's not just a thing you're going to give to someone. You're going to create a world of some kind that people are going to enter into. And when they come out the other side, they're going to be different. And not everyone is enthusiastic about creating that sort of thing. But for people who are, there's a loneliness in it because you're making this thing, but you can't go into it yourself, right? Because you know too much about it, right? You're all backstage and you know all the parts that are fake. You're creating this sort of illusion that you're bringing people into, and there's a loneliness in that. And so naturally, people who create these things, they need to talk to someone about it. They need to kind of compare notes about what it is to create these things, because it's not easy. One of my favorite pieces of writing in all of human history is the introduction to Faust by Goethe. And everybody knows the story of Faust, about a guy making a deal with the devil that doesn't go so great. The opening to it is sort of startling because the story of Faust is embedded in a frame, which is God and the devil having a conversation about making a bet about how this thing's going to turn out. And that's the frame around Faust. But there's a frame around that frame. And the frame above that is three people get together. One of them is a comedian, one of them is a poet, and one of them is the theater manager. And they are looking down on God and the devil, who are looking down on Faust and everything happening in that story. And they're having an argument about what is going to make the best kind of experience, right? The poet wants it to be beautiful. The comedian wants people to enjoy it. And the theater owner just wants to get them to come in and pay the ticket price. And that picture of like the creators of this entertainment being, in a sense, above God and the devil because they're creating the whole bigger picture, like there's something in that. It kind of speaks to this sort of loneliness of creating this content. You can feel very much by yourself. And so I think that's what it is that brings these disparate creators together.
That's brilliant. A shared loneliness and also the ability to go into other people's worlds, even though we have our own worlds that we share that we can't go into our own, but at least I can go into yours.
That's right. No, that's right.
All right. That kind of wraps up the main stuff. I have a little quick fire I like to do before we wrap up completely. Just quick little questions, top of mind answers. What are you currently playing?
Playing a lot of Palia right now, which is an interesting multiplayer crafting game. It's an interesting multiplayer MMO with no combat, and that's a fascinating one. And also I'm finding Spell Tower, game that's been around for a while, one of Zach Gage's games. I'm realizing that in terms of playing that game every day, it has a really interesting cycle where I'm finding playing a game of it takes about 6 weeks, which is a new kind of cycle of gaming that I've never ever done before, and I like it a lot.
Cool. What are you reading right now? What's on the bookshelf?
Reading a lot of things. I'm reading Confederacy of Dunces, a novel I'd never gotten around to, and I am blown away by the comedy and the insights in this novel, which is the only novel written by this person, and it was unpublished during their lifetime, and so that's fascinating. I don't quite know how it turns out, so that's definitely one I'm reading. And I'm also trying to read a book by Leonard Susskind on quantum physics, because my daughter's entered a PhD program in chemistry, and I'm like, oh, I think I can learn enough about quantum physics I can have a conversation with her. I'm like, oh my God, this is so much harder than I realized.
Yeah, that's a dense subject right there. What's the best advice you've ever received in your career?
Different isn't always better, but better is always different.
I like that.
Yeah, I could learn that from Scotty Meltzer, who was a comedian.
All right. So, if you could play a game with any 4 people, living or dead, from any time in history, play with, and what would you play?
Yeah, I know there's a game I always think of, Rhythmomachy, which was it's kind of like a mathematical chess game that was like 2 chessboards long, and all the pieces were numbers and shapes. And it's all about trying to make mathematical sequences on the board. And it was really hot. I want to say it's around Francis Bacon's time. This was before chess had really conquered Europe. Chess really sort of blew Rhythmomachy out of the water, because Rhythmomachy was a bit of a crazy, insane game. But everything we know about what that whole culture of the Rhythmomachy players was like, it would be like if Magic the Gathering existed back then, and then it disappeared and no one ever wrote anything down. It would be like that. It would be like the whole culture of that went away. So that's one that leaps to mind for me, to get together with other people from that time. I have to imagine Galileo probably played this game, and I'd be looking for some of the great thinkers of that time and understanding, like, okay, how did you all play this, and what was that culture like?
That'd be fascinating. Yeah. Okay, so before we close up shop here, is there anything that you're working on? Any new releases you want to talk about or just promote, or anything going on?
Oh boy, we're always working on a ton of stuff I can talk about. Where, Among Us VR has been a game that we've been incredibly proud of. It's been fun to work on, and we have all these interesting new things that I can't talk about in detail yet, but they're coming very soon. So I would say keep an eye on Among Us VR, because you're going to see some new things happening there. Nice. Another game to keep an eye out for, another VR game we're doing, Silent Slayer, which is our vampire hunting game, where there's going to be an announcement about it very shortly. New trailers coming out for that. We don't have a release date announced yet, but that definitely keep an eye out for that one. Those are a couple of ones that I can talk about right now. At the moment, we're working on a bunch of new stuff I can't talk about yet, but definitely. Those are some of the ones to watch for. And of course, I'll always give a plug for the I Expect You to Die games, which have
have continued to do very well for us.
Number 3 in that series dropped mid last year.
Yeah, it was last year, and the whole trilogy has been doing very well. We're all really proud about it, about how well they've been received, and so that it's been super fun to work with everybody on this.
It's fun to play too. So, all right, I'm going to give you the last word. So before I close the doors here, do you have any final words of wisdom to take us out?
The main thing, anybody who's trying to create games, I know it can be kind of intimidating when you're new to it, and even when you're not new to it, and it changes. It can always be intimidating, and just understanding that, embracing that, it's okay. It's okay. If you want to make games, just get in there and do it. Just find a way, get in there and do it. Don't worry about them being good. Just because they're not gonna be. Your early games are gonna be bad, and even later they're gonna be bad. But if you're interested in making games, don't be afraid of failure. Just do it, because making games is how you get good at making games.
Well, as we close the cover on another evening's conversation, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Jesse for unveiling the magic behind the lenses that shape our gaming experiences. And to you, dear listener, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to scribe a review, share the tale with your party, and cast that subscribe spell on your way out. May your designs be bold, your stories profound, and your games a wonder. Stay safe out there, Wanderer. Your chair will be waiting for you by the fire the next time you stop by the corner of story and game.